Hey guys, it's Belle, and in this video we are going to be reading through and translating a fascinating poem in 9th century Old High German, which is called Muspilli, after a hapax legomenon within this poem, whose meaning we are not fully sure of. It is attested as marginalia, only partially because we don't have the beginning or the ending intact, in Bayerische Staatsbibliothek MS CLM 14098 on folio 61R and 119V to 121V. And if you want to have a look at the manuscript itself, I've put a link there in the description and in the slides of this video so you can have a look at it yourself, and you can also see some of it on the screen right now. So what I'm going to do is actually divide this video into 3 parts, because scholars think that this poem might be composed of 2 different poems which for some reason got mashed together in the manuscript. And I'll call these poems, for the sake of argument, Poem A and Poem B. Now, the theory goes that the first 37 lines of the poem are the first half of Poem A. And then the second poem, Poem B, is composed of lines 37 to 62. And the main reason that we think this is because all of a sudden we get this reference to a fight between the prophet Elijah and the Antichrist, and there's just none of that in the theme of the poem previously or afterwards. It's about the fate of the soul after death, and all of a sudden we have a battle at Armageddon, so to speak. So that's the reason why scholars think this might be an interpolated part. So part B, poem B, I should say, is going to be these 2 slides, so lines 37 to 62. And then the second half of poem A is lines 63 to 103. So what I'm going to do in this series of videos is I'm going to read them out in 3 different parts. So the first half of poem A, poem B, and then the second part of poem A, and you guys can make up your own mind as to whether you think they are separate pieces or unified pieces. I mean, there's a lot of scholarly debate over this poem, Muspilli, in general. It's very enigmatic. It's got some pagan elements mixed in here, which make it really interesting to read from a Christian perspective. There's lots and lots to talk about. So let's get on with that. And as usual, if you want to pause the video and have a go at translating it on your own using the gloss provided, feel free to do so. And of course, as usual, do forgive my poor High German pronunciation, as it is not my specialty. So what does this say? Sind hats bequeme, dat toan skal. Wanta sara so sicht jusela in den sindar hevit, entit den lîhhamun likkan lâzzit, so quimet ein herri von a himmel dungalon, dat andar von a peche. Daar waren sie umpi. Sorgen macht jusela, und sie die suona arget, sie a wedere moherrie sie gehallos verde. Wanta ipusia dat satanses gesintig finnet, dat slettet sia sar dardir leithi wirdet, in fiure entien finsteri, dat ist rechto werenig ding. So what does this mean? Of course, we have ellipses here because there could be some more context which elucidates the meaning of the sentence more clearly, but it's been lost in the manuscript. So, sind hats bequeme, since it would befall, dat toan skal, that he has to die, or that the man has to die. Vanta sarso sicht jusela in den sind arhevit. So, because immediately, or as soon as, jusela, the soul, sich in den sind arhevit, literally heaves itself onto its journey. Enti siden lîhhamun likkan lâzzit. I think the only way we can really conceptualize this is for us to interpret the action of allowing itself to lie in the body as starting the journey to the next stage of the afterlife. That's how I think we're meant to read this here. So from Vanta all the way to Lâzzit, we have as soon as the soul heaves itself onto its journey and allows itself to lie in the body. So quimet ein herri von a himmelsungalon. So immediately one Lord comes from the heaven star, or the heavenly constellations, basically. That's andar von a peche, and another Lord from the pitch. Now, it's not literally from like a tar pit. This is a sort of metaphor for hell and for hellfire, because of course pitch is flammable. And I think part of the reason they're using pitch here, even though arguably actually, using something like fjord might have made it easier to create an alliteration there, because fonna himmeltungalon, fonna fjord. I think the reason they've done peche here is to draw an aesthetic contrast with the stars of heaven that we've got in this previous clause. So one Lord is coming from the place of light, which is bright, and then the other Lord is coming from the place which is dark. But through the use of the metaphor of pitch, we can still draw the associations with hellfire and with the sort of Lord being bright. Essentially, this is a way of implying that even though Satan is coming from fire, or a fiery place, hellfire, it's not, you know, it's not a bright fire, it's not a good fire in the same way that we normally think of it. So this is a way of potentially undermining some of the positive attributes of fire, which might cause confusion in how the reader esteems Christ versus Satan, respectively. So that's just my personal reading of that. And then, so when one Lord has come from the stars and the other has come from the pitch, dara pagant siu umpi, then they fight with each other. Sorgen mag diu sela. The soul, literally this is makes sorrow, or it could be a verb and an infinitive, meaning the soul may sorrow, although I think makes sorrow is more appropriate here. And that would mean something like the soul, is worried or is stressed. Unsi diu suana arget. And this is until the reconciliation happens or comes to pass. Za vedremo herrie si gihalot verde. To which Lord she will be hallowed. So, the soul worries until the reconciliation happens, to which Lord she will be hallowed. So, of course, that's whether the soul is going to heaven or to hell. Vanta epusia dat satansis gesinti gefinit. So, immediately, if Satan's retinue, basically, warriors, win her, dat leitet sia sard dar laid with it. That it leads her basically immediately where her path shall be, in fjord enti infinstri, into fire and into darkness. So again, that's quite an explicit affirmation of the reason that why they've used peche there. So it's a fire that is somehow dark, and that's because it's this, like, they're using the metaphor of pitch to get at it here. Dat ist rechter wirrnig thing. That is truly a gruesome thing. So, as soon as Satan's companions win the soul, then they're going to lead it onto its path towards fire and darkness. It's very dramatic stuff here. So, on to lines 11 to 24. Ubi sia avar ke halod die dar vana himmele quemant, enti si der angelo egan with it. Die pringent sia sar uffin himmelorichi, dar ist lieb anno tod, liocht anno finsteri, selida anno sorgen, dar nist nioman siuch. Denne der man in paradisu pucifinet, hus in himmele, dar quimet imo hilfa genoak. Pidiu ist durchmikkel, aller manner wellichemo, dat in es in mord gespanne, dat Gottes willun kernatur en die hella fjord hard hovisse, peches pina. Daar reputet der satans, altis hitsan lauk, so mak hukkan sadiu, sorgen drato, der sich suntien fates. So what does all of this mean? Ufisia aparke halant die. So if on the other hand, they hallow her, die darda vana himne quemant, they who come from heaven, enti cidra angelo egan with it, and she becomes, the egan is property, derva angelo, the property of the angels. Die bringent sia sar uf in himlo richi. They bring her immediately upwards into the kingdom of the heavens. Dar ist lieb anotod. There is life without death. Liocht anno finstri, light without darkness. Selida anno sorgun, companions without sorrow. Now this is a curious one. I think the reference here to Selida anno sorgun, I think it evokes the relationship between warriors and their retinue, which was considered really important in early medieval Germanic societies. And I can't remember, I'm sorry, the person who it is, but I believe it might have been a Saxon or a Frankish or even an Anglo-Saxon warlord during the early period of conversion to Christianity, who said that he would rather burn with his ancestors in hell because he was told that his ancestors were not saved. It was one baptism, one salvation, essentially. And I've learned that from Tom Shippey's lectures on Beowulf, which you can watch on YouTube. But anyway, this pagan apparently, upon hearing that his ancestors would not go to heaven in the afterlife with him, because only he's the one who's being saved, he retracted his confession of faith and said that he would rather burn in hell with his ancestors than dine in heaven with his enemies, or something like this. And I think maybe that's what this is meant to be getting at. It's maybe meant to be, I guess, hinting at the fact that pagans who are faced with what Tom Shippey calls the granny problem, right? The post-conversion anxiety of, okay, well, I've accepted the Christian faith, I'm going to go to heaven, but what about my grandmother, who was pagan, but I know was a good person? And perhaps this Arnos Organ without sorrows is meant to assuage that a bit, saying, you'll be among your companions and you won't be worried about what's coming after. And it also might be a reference to not having any sorrow from the risk of losing your companions, because we know in Old English poems, of which obviously far more have survived than Old High German poems, we know in Old English secular poems or secular-ish poems like The Wanderer and The Seafarer, how the loss of companions is the source of great sorrow for a warrior. And so this could be a reference to it as well. The Arnosorgen might, on the one hand, be meant to say that even though you won't be with your pagan ancestors, you'll still be happy and you'll still have companions, and also to say that you'll have companions, you'll get to enjoy their company, and you won't have to worry about losing them to the transient nature of the terrestrial life. So I think that's maybe some of the, so those are maybe some of the anxieties that this poem is trying to assuage with that. And notice also that they've mentioned that, Liocht anno finstri, with light without shadow, drawing a direct contrast to the fact that in the previous few lines we was told how the devils, the companions of Satan, will drag the soul into darkness if they get their way. So, one more little description of heaven here. Darn ist neoman siuch. In heaven, nobody is sick. And this sort of draws on like lapsarian ideas about how illness is a consequence of the fall from grace and from heaven. And many early medieval astronomical and scientific texts, such as De Ordine Creaturarum, states that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were immortal, they were not sick, and they were invulnerable. And it was only after the fall that they had the potential to become sick. So, of course, in heaven, when everyone is living perfectly hallowed lives and united to Christ and all this lot, in that context, nobody is going to be sick. So that's what you get here. So in heaven, we have life without death, light without darkness, companions without sorrows, and nobody is sick. Sounds like a nice place. So, denne der man in paradisu pu gefinnet. So when the man wins pu, which is wealth or prize in paradise, and that's kind of an interesting one here. This idea of a person winning a house. Now, it has some scriptural bases of, I believe Jesus at some points in the New Testament says that rewards will be given in heaven, almost promising a reversal of earthly fortunes where the poor will be abundant in heaven. So this is probably what it's referring to. And the poo here could also be a reference to eternal life, really. He also wins a hus in himmele, a house in heaven. Dar quimit imo hilfa kinwalk. There enough help or sufficient help will come to him. Now, I'm sort of not sure whether this is referring to this life or the next life, because we could interpret this, I should say, as when man wins reward in paradise by ensuring that reward in paradise through doing good deeds on earth, enough help will come to him. That's one way we can read it. So we can read the sentence as saying, if you do good things, God will reward you with assistance in this life. Or it could be a reference to, you getting enough help in the afterlife. But I think the fact that it's saying enough help will come to him seems a bit confusing, for the simple reason that in heaven, in paradise, there should be no logical need for help, right? It's already a perfect place, as we've had explained to us above. So I sort of lean towards thinking that this line from Dena to Kinuak might be trying to say that if a man does good things on this earth, God will reward him with assistance. Pidiu ist thurft michel alra mano willichmo. So therefore it is very necessary to each of all the men, dat in es sin mort kispanne, that his mood, basically mort, trying to think of how to translate this, like encourages or urges him into this. Dat kotes willun kernotur, that he eagerly perform God's will, enti hella fiur harho wise, and he be aware of the fire of hell, peches pina, of the that he also be aware of the pain of the pitch. Dar putit der satanats altit hetsan lauk. There Satan endures the hottest flame of all. Very dramatic stuff. So mak hukan tadiu. So he may think about that. Sorgendrato, he may suffer greatly. Der sich suntigen waits, who knows himself to sin. This is an accusative inventive construction. So literally it means who knows that he sins. So this line, so mark all the way to Waits, is saying, let him think about these things and let him sorrow who knows that he sins. And the things that he should think about are the fires of hell which Satan is enduring. So, on to the last bit of the first part of poem A. We demo in wins the shall sino wirna stuen prenan in peche. Dat ist rechter palwik dink, dat der man harde zegote enti immo hilfeniquimet. Vanet sich gnada die vena gasela, nist in kihutin himmeliskin gote, vanta hier in wervelti after nivergotta. So denne der machtigo kunik, dat machel kepanet, darra skal queman kuno ke lichas. Denne nikit dar parno nochin, denne pan for the wisan. Ni allra manno wellich zedemo machale skuli, dar skal vorra demo riche atrach hustantan, pidat in werelthi guergot hapeta. All right, so what does all of this mean? Where demo in winstri skal sireno wirna stuen. So woe be to him who shall in the darkness, in vinstri, sino wirna stuen, account for his crimes or his sins, basically. Prenan in peche, for him who shall burn in the pitch. Dat ist rechter palwig dink. That is truly a baleful thing. That's der man harret zu Gotte. That man cries out to God, enti immo hilfen niquimit, and help does not come for him. Now, based on the obvious context that this is being recorded by Christian missionaries in the Christian context, I think this one is probably not saying that man is crying out to God in this life and help doesn't come to him, which is maybe leading me to revise a little bit my conclusion that this line here, Dar quimit imo hilfa kinuak, refers to the terrestrial life rather than the celestial life, because obviously it would be contradictory if they are saying that sometimes man prays to God and God doesn't help him in this life. So maybe it is a reference to the fate in the afterlife. And this reference of man calling out to God would sort of evoke imagery from poetry, which would be quite common in this time, about the harrowing of hell, which is not described in great detail in the New Testament, but it was elaborated greatly as part of Christian mythology and poetry during the early Middle Ages. And in Old English, I believe we have both prose and poetic accounts of this, which are pretty dramatic. It is also discussed in the Old English poem Christ and Satan. And in these poems about the harrowing of hell, we sort of get these really powerful and gripping scenes of the the sort of BC, basically, humans who died before Jesus lived and couldn't therefore have known the child of God and the Saviour, reaching out to Jesus. Sometimes even it's literally Adam and Eve who are in hell calling out to Jesus. And in Christ and Satan, there's a really dramatic line of Eve like calling out to Jesus and asking for mercy on account of the sins that she committed. It's wild stuff. And if you want me to do a video on those passages from Old English poetry, like, let me know in the comments and I'll definitely get on with that. But the point is, this image of humans crying out to God from hell would have evoked all of these poems that they've heard before about the harrowing of hell. So anyway, it is truly a dreadful thing that man cries out to God and help does not come for him because he is in hell. Vanet sic Kenata diu venera sela. This is the miserable soul, vanet sic Kenata, hopes for or dreams for mercy for itself. Nist in gehuchten himmelisken Gotte. So it is not in heavenly thoughts for God. And here this dative Gotte is probably being used as a dative of possession, to use the Wankish term. Vanta hier in wereldi after niverkota. So since here in this world, afterwards or after that, he did not accomplish it. So I think what this is saying that a person's soul cries out for mercy, and it is not in God's heavenly thoughts to not, I guess, perform that mercy or to grant that mercy here in this world. Or perhaps this is a reference to the person not having performed mercy in this world and therefore God not granting mercy in the afterlife. It's a bit ambiguous, I would say. So then on to the next one. So denne der machtigo kunig dats machog panet. So when the mighty king commands the machal, which is a word for court, and it's kind of an interesting metaphor for the judgment day, right? They're literally sort of conceptualizing Jesus as a king who holds court in sort of similar ways to how God is, or Jesus rather, is metaphoricized as a pagan, not a pagan, but obviously, but as a Saxon warrior in the old Saxon poem Heliand, which I'll also be covering on my channel. So God commands a court like a secular king. Darda skal queman kuno kilichas. Then each of the, now kun is a interesting word. It sort of means a type in its most generic, abstract sense, in Gothic, kuni. I've done a video on that, how to say gay in Gothic, where I analyse that word kuni, because it can sort of mean type, it can mean gender, it can mean tribe, it can also mean race. It's a word for a category. Some people probably translate this as races, and it would mean that, because it would mean every kind of person, but it basically means every kind of person shall come to it. Denne nikitar parno nochin den pan fordit sittan. Sorry. So then nochin parno, no, not one of the children, nikitar does not dare den pan fordit sittan, to sit away from the order, or to ignore basically that order. Ni alro mano welich zedama machlis guli. Nor any one of all of the men should ignore, because we have skuli here, but that we need an infinitive for that. So we just take the infinitive from that one, or maybe it's even got an implied infinitive, I should say, of wisan. So and also each of all the men should be sedema machale, at the court, essentially. And of course this court is referring to Judgment Day, because the sins of everybody are accounted for as if in a secular court. Daar skal vorda de moriche at rachu stantan. There shall he vorda de moriche, before that ruler at rachu stantan, he shall stand at the counting, at the reckoning. Pidats in veralti kuerkot hapeta, according to that which he in this world has enacted, has performed. So what this first half of poem A is saying is that when the soul dies and it lies in the body, immediately two lords come, one from heaven and one from hell, and if Satan has won this person's soul, then it drags it down to hell, where the soul cannot rely on God's mercy. And if the angels get him, then the soul goes up to heaven and it gets to live in paradise and be very happy. And this all happens at the big judgment, which is announced by Christ, which nobody can avoid. Nobody can avoid Christ's judgment, because of course death comes for us all in the end. And so that has been the first half of poem A, and in the next video I will be doing poem B, where we get to have a really energetic fight between the prophet Elijah and the Antichrist. So I hope you guys have enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. If you want me to teach you Latin or Old English or Gothic, I won't teach you Old High German, I'm afraid, because I'm not that good at it, but Latin or Gothic or Old English, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which will be linked in the description of this video. Thank you to my 3 Patreon supporters for your very much appreciated contributions. You help me to improve this channel and to keep doing it, so thank you so much for that. And you can also join my Discord server, where I tend to post these glosses as pictures before I turn them into videos, so you can get early access to them there. And we're also just a fun community of like-minded people. We get together, we share memes, it's a good time. You should come and join us. And, the usual stuff, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye, everyone.